Could the Red Sox big bat be this switch-hitting outfielder? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Sea Radio. My name is Corbin. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down the latest reports surrounding the Boston Red Sox and the possibility of them bringing in this all-star slugger. We're also going to talk about whether or not this is something we want the Red Sox to do. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. Okay, so the player we are breaking down in today's video is Anthony Santander, and the reason we are breaking him down for the Boston Red Sox is because lately he's been very connected to this Red Sox team. Over the last week or so, we've gotten multiple reports that the Red Sox are in pretty heavily with Anthony Santander. About a week ago, Hector Gomez of the Dominican Republic reported that the Red Sox have strong interest in Santander, including that talks have intensified lately. Now, when it comes to the validity of Hector Gomez's reporting, some people aren't too keen on believing it, but here's what I'll say. He has been pretty accurate, especially when it comes to Latin American players, especially this offseason. He was pretty accurate with where the Red Sox stood in the Juan Soto sweepstakes and the Juan Soto sweepstakes in general. So I tend to believe Hector Gomez on this report, and the other reason I believe this report is because it's kind of being backed up by other people that talk about baseball. Mark Feinsand of MLB also put that he believes that Anthony Santander and the Red Sox have been connected, as well as John Morrissey, who reiterated the same thing, saying the Red Sox have heavy interest in Anthony Santander. Now, both of these guys also come with their own faults when it comes to their overall credibility, but once you start getting two separate sources, right, you've got Hector Gomez, as well as two people from MLB.com and three overall reporters saying that, hey, there might be some interest here with Anthony Santander for the Boston Red Sox. I think you start to connect the dots a little bit, and there's more than likely a chance the Red Sox are at least moderately to heavily involved in this Santander sweepstakes. So the question now becomes, why? Why are the Red Sox so interested in Anthony Santander? Well, there are a few reasons why he makes a lot of sense, and it all has to do with his bat. I think the biggest one when it comes to his offense is his power. Over the last 3 seasons, he's averaging 35 home runs a season, 30 doubles a season, and about 95 RBIs. And to that point, he's coming off of the best overall season he's had in the big league so far, with a 235 average, a 308 on base percentage, and a 506 slug for a 134 OPS plus, 34% above league average production, with a career high 44 home runs and 102 RBIs. This season, he was an all-star, a silver slugger that probably should have gone to Jarren Duran, but that's a separate conversation, and he finished 14th in MVP voting. He's also extremely versatile at the plate. He is a switch hitter, which means he can produce from both the left and the right-hand side. And taking a look at those splits, it's actually a pretty solid mix. From the left-hand side, he had an 822 OPS and a 127 OPS plus, and from the right-hand side, he had a 793 OPS and a 120 OPS plus. I've seen some people really dive into these a bit and say, well, he's not going to be an incredibly productive hitter against left-handed pitching because look at this, 32 home runs from the left-hand side versus 12 home runs from the right-hand side. But what I will say to that is that has a lot to do with the actual sample size that's going on with Anthony Santander. Obviously, as most pitchers in Major League Baseball are right-handed, he's going to have more opportunities from the left-hand side. But if you take a look at the home runs per at-bat from both sides, they're pretty equal. From the left-hand side, he's averaging a home run every 13.59 at-bats. And from the right-hand side, he's averaging a home run every 13.3 at-bats. Basically, he was just as effective from both sides of the plate, especially when it comes to the long ball this year. And his bat would play at Fenway Park, or at least it should play at Fenway Park, considering of all the ballparks he has played in, he has more home runs in Fenway than any other park, obviously outside of Camden Yards. Plus, he's a pretty difficult dude to strike out. Throughout his career, he's averaging a strikeout rate of 20.7%, which is 2% below league average production. Now, obviously, 2% doesn't sound like a crazy amount, but when you consider your previous right-handed bat was about 10% above your strikeout rate nationally this season, that's a whole lot less strikeouts in your lineup from that sort of power position side. And this season in 2024, he was in the 66th percentile in strikeout rate as well as the 60th percentile in walk rate. So you're talking about a guy, when it comes to the obvious reasons as to why the Red Sox would be interested in him, that kind of fits the bill for exactly what the Red Sox are looking for. They're looking for a versatile hitter who can add some pop to the middle of this lineup and obviously help with that strikeout rate, and Anthony Santander checks off all of those boxes. Although, here's what I'll say. I don't think Anthony Santander is a perfect fit, and I actually do think there are some reasons why it might not make a ton of sense for the Red Sox. In my opinion, the biggest reason why it might not make a ton of sense for the Red Sox to actually land on Anthony Santander has a lot to do with just the fact that he doesn't get a ton of overall hits. Throughout his career, he's sitting right around that 250 batting average mark at 246 in 8 seasons, and I know batting average is a bit of an antiquated way of determining a player's worth, right? I think at this point, with all the metrics that we have in Major League Baseball, there are, in my opinion, better ways of figuring out how impactful a player could be in a lineup, i.e. see Kyle Schwarber back in 2021, right? That's a guy who didn't have a high average but made a really big impact on the Boston Red Sox, but still, overall, when you're taking a look at the course of a 162-game season, I think there is something to be said about a guy who's only going to get a hit 24.6% of his at-bats. He is sort of that 3 true outcome player where it's either a walk, a strikeout, or a home run. Now, obviously, he does a bit of a better job not striking out than a lot of those 3 true outcome players, but that's definitely sort of his MO. He doesn't get a ton of hits. It's just when he does get those hits, they end up being pretty meaningful ones. So I think that's absolutely something to consider here. I do think the Red Sox have enough high contact type players where they could get away with having someone like this in the middle of the order. So you could kind of hide that low hit probability, but at the same time too, it's definitely something that sticks out to me. On top of that, we also got to talk about where he would fit in defensively. Now, historically, Anthony Santander hasn't exactly been a fantastic defender. He does have some positive metrics, though. If you take a look at how he played in right field, he does have positive defensive run saves career-wise, and he has spent some time at first base, which again was a positive defensive run saved at 1, although that is only a 13-game sample size. The question becomes, is this someone the Red Sox are going to be comfortable with playing the outfield for a couple of years to come? I don't know if the answer is effectively yes to that question, right? I will say, though, if we're talking about defensive issues, and a lot of people are sitting there saying, well, they could just have Teoscar Hernandez instead of Anthony Santander, this season, Anthony Santander was actually statistically a better defender than Teoscar Hernandez was, so there is that conversation to be had, and I do think while he wasn't stellar defensively, and while career-wise he's been pretty effectively a below-average defender for taking a look at the outs above average metric, especially this season where he had -2 outs above average overall between a couple of different positions here, I do think he could be relatively solid in left field, specifically at Fenway Park. He doesn't have a ton of range, but he does have a pretty solid arm. I do think that is someone who, if he can learn the monster pretty well, could get closer to that league average mark. I wouldn't be terrified to have him in the outfield defensively with this Red Sox team, but I do also think that is something they need to consider. Again, if we're talking about reasons to possibly avoid Anthony Santander, I think this one might be up there. And ultimately, I think one of the bigger reasons, if it's not the average, it's what Anthony Santander is looking for in a contract this season, because reportedly already coming out is that Anthony Santander is looking for a 5-year deal. 5 years doesn't seem like a ton of time, but for a guy like this, it absolutely could be. We don't know how that bat is going to age. If he's already sort of a lower contact type guy with a meaningful pop, what happens as he gets older and that pop starts to deteriorate a little bit, right? That could end up being a pretty disastrous contract on the back end. So while I don't hate the idea of 5 years, I just don't think 5 years for a guy like Anthony Santander makes a ton of sense, especially, again, when you consider probably the most comparable counterpart on the open market to Santander, Teoscar Hernandez, which a lot of people currently prefer. Teoscar's looking for 3 years. That's where he's going for in a contract. To me, that seems much more reasonable over the long term than Anthony Santander for 5 seasons, because the other reason why you shouldn't probably give Anthony Santander 5 years is because that's going to really clog up your outfield. Again, there are some other places you could play Santander, but you'd have to really stretch it out to make that work. Even going into the outfield, you're probably going to have to trade Abreu just to get Santander into this lineup every day. Plus, you also have to consider the possibility of Christian Campbell being out there. You obviously have to consider the possibility of Roman Anthony being out there, right? You probably don't want to have a long-term commitment to someone like Santander with those guys in the wings. I think there are solutions to this problem, though. I think the biggest one is obviously just move him over to the DH slot. But again, you would either have to trade Masataka Yoshida or you would have to simply sign him long enough where you can wait out Masataka Yoshida's contract or something like that. Again, we talk about this every time we talk about any sort of bat solution to the Red Sox problems, right? We know the Red Sox want a bat in this lineup somewhere. The problem is there just really isn't a perfect fit available on the open market. Whether you want to talk about Bregman, whether you want to talk about Teoscar, whether you want to talk about Arenado, whoever you guys want to talk about, even a guy like Seiya Suzuki, they're not perfect fits for this current Red Sox roster, and that's because they do have a lot of talented players on their team right now that are clogging up a lot of these positions on the diamond. Even with Anthony Santander having all of these positives, you have to squint a little bit to see how he's going to fit on this current roster. And again, you're going to have to squint to see a perfect fit with any of these guys. So I don't want to totally hold that against him. I don't want to totally sit here and say, well, he's not 100% a fit for the Red Sox, so they absolutely should not go after a guy like this. Because again, you could say that about any single bat the Red Sox want to take a look at. So I don't really know where I land on this Anthony Santander thing. I could tell you for sure I would be pretty upset if the Red Sox ended up signing him to a 5-year deal unless there's some sort of team option there after year 2 or after year 3 or something like that. That's sort of where I'm landing on this. I think at this point when we're talking about the bats the Red Sox are interested in, I think they just need to pick a direction and go for it, right? All of these guys have some positives that would bring a whole lot of change to this Red Sox lineup. Bregman, high contact, low strikeout type guy. Santander is going to be a lower contact, higher power, less strikeout type guy. And Teoscar Hernandez is still, in my opinion, the number one target the Red Sox should be after in terms of a bat because he could do sort of both, right? He doesn't strike out as much as Tyler O'Neill. It's certainly below average, but it's not as much as Tyler O'Neill. He's a higher average type kind of guy, and he's going to hit for a lot of power, especially at Fenway Park. So I still think that's my number one option, but honestly, at this point, I'm okay with any of these guys. I just want the Red Sox to be decisive here. Pick a lane and figure out that direction. Go and get whoever you're looking to get. I don't love the idea of stalling this out, right? We had a ton of action during winter meetings, and now all of a sudden we're going to be sitting here making up stuff, right, as we go along until they actually make a decision over the next, month or so. I do think there's going to be some time here before we get a conclusion to any of these players and which direction the Red Sox pick, and I do think they end up with one of the 3 of these guys. It sounds like right now Anthony Santander is a real possibility, but again, we've got a while to wait on that. And again, I'm kind of in the middle on Santander. I don't know if I love it, and I don't know if I hate it either, so I want you guys to help me decide. Let me know in the comment section down below if you are for Anthony Santander. Let me know why in the comment section. If you're against Anthony Santander, let me know why as well. And ultimately, regardless of your for or with, what would your contract offer be? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It just helps out a ton, and it's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Don't forget, if you want to listen instead of watch these episodes, all you got to do is head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the Red Seats.